Time for an update on some previous lessons of plain English. Hi everyone, Jeff here. Thanks for joining us this Thursday for Plain English. This is lesson number 251. You can find the full lesson at plainenglish.com/251. On today's lesson, we'll revisit some of the topics we've touched on in the past few years and provide you with an update. We'll tell you the latest from Notre-Dame, Mount Everest, the New York City Subway, the Houston Astros, and a few more. Don't forget to stick around until the very end when I give you my own personal taste test as a follow-up to lesson 151. Just over 1 year ago, the Notre-Dame Cathedral in Paris caught fire. We talked about it in lesson 149 and lesson 154. A large portion of its roof fell in, and its famous spire collapsed onto the area where the altar would be. The fire started from either an electrical glitch or an errant cigarette. Remarkably, it caused no loss of life, and many, though not all, of the cathedral's priceless pieces of art were saved. France's business community pledged 850 million euros to rebuild the famous cathedral. French President Emmanuel Macron promised that it would be rebuilt within 5 years. Christmas 2019 was the first in over 200 years that did not feature a Mass at Notre-Dame Cathedral. 1 year on, the difficult work of restoration is underway. The cathedral remains in a precarious position. Large parts of the building are weakened due to the fire, and it's an urgent priority to make structural repairs to prevent further damage being done. Scientists working inside have to put on heavy protective suits and wear masks because of the toxic chemicals released when the lead roof melted. Meanwhile, a public spat has broken out between the chief architect and the leader of the restoration. The architect, Philippe Villeneuve, wants to build an exact replica of the original spire. The French Army general in charge of the reconstruction effort has different ideas. He said the new spire should be more contemporary. When asked about the architect's differing opinion, the general said the architect should shut his mouth. A lot of the restoration work has been paused due to the coronavirus. The 116-year-old New York City Subway is a bit more high-tech. In Lesson 60, we talked about how the famous Subway would be introducing electronic payments, retiring the yellow plastic Metro cards, which themselves were a high-tech replacement for tokens, which were a high-tech replacement for coins. On my last visit to New York, I finally saw Omni, O-M-N-Y, an acronym for One Metro New York, and a play on words since the prefix omni means all or of every kind. It's the new electronic way to get on the subway, buses, and other forms of public transportation in New York. You can use your phone, a contactless credit card, smartwatch, or even Fitbit to pay your fare. So all you future New York tourists will be denied the exquisite New York pleasure of standing at the MetroCard vending machines trying to figure out what card to buy while impatient commuters stand behind you. Instead, your utter confusion will be delayed until after you pass through the turnstiles and stare at the map. Speaking of the map, the designer of the modern New York subway map, Michael Hertz, died recently. If you've been on the New York subway, you've definitely seen his artwork. The previous subway map was more like the ones in Munich, Washington, D.C., and London. The lines were straight with consistent angles. It was more like a diagram than a map. The current New York subway map is different. The curves are more accurate, and you can easily tell where stations are in relation to geographic landmarks. In lesson 161, we talked about an inconvenient traffic jam. Hundreds of climbers hoping to reach the summit of Mount Everest were jammed together on a narrow path, all clinging to a single safety line. Last year's hiking season was one of the deadliest on record, and hikers say that's because inexperienced climbers, encouraged by unscrupulous guides, try to climb the mountain without sufficient experience or sufficient strength. In response, the government of Nepal pledged to strengthen safety measures, but they couldn't get them passed in time for this year's climbing season, which is going on right now. One reason is that the fees charged per climber, about $11,000, are an important source of revenue for Nepal's government, and they don't want to put that money at risk. The new rules would have included a cap on the number of climbing permits, a requirement that guides have high altitude experience, and a price increase. Some private guides are taking things into their own hands. They're independently requiring their clients to prove that they have the climbing skill needed to survive at such high altitudes, and they're increasing equipment inspections. That's good for them, but even the best guides and most prepared climbers will have to contend with Instagram-obsessed people pushing and shoving in line unless there's a reform of the system. For this year, though, the coronavirus may slow down the traffic. In Lesson 3, all the way back in Lesson 3, we talked about how the Houston Astros won the 2017 World Series of Baseball. That victory has a cloud over it now. The Astros were found to have illegally used cameras to steal signs and spy on opposing teams in 2017 and 2018. A number of coaches and executives were fired as a result of the scandal, and the team was fined $5 million, the maximum allowed. In lesson 140, we talked about the university admissions scandal, where parents were paying a so-called college counselor to cheat the admissions system and get their kids admitted to exclusive universities. Over 50 people have been charged. Many have pled guilty. Actress Felicity Huffman was sentenced to 14 days in jail and 250 hours of community service. Several other wealthy parents were sentenced to between 1 and 4 months in prison. And just recently, in lesson 231, we talked about how scientists now believe the average human body temperature is a bit higher than previously thought. That should come in handy as technology companies are developing more efficient and less intrusive ways to measure body temperature. The new devices are intended to scan people for fevers as they enter public places like buildings or train stations. Some are used up close and look like a price scanner at a store. Others can be used more remotely and kept out of sight. The technology was already being deployed before the coronavirus, but is now enjoying a surge in demand. Today's expression is underway. I'm still amazed that we are now in lesson 251, and I almost never have trouble finding a unique English expression to talk about. Every so often, I have to go back and read the main lesson, and I don't see a good expression right away, but that is the exception. Of course, sometimes I accidentally repeat one, like I did with silver lining a few weeks ago. Anyway, underway. What does it mean to be underway? It means a process has recently begun. It's in progress. The renovations at Notre-Dame Cathedral are underway. After the fire, the immediate concern was the safety of the people in the area and the structural integrity of the building. Then there was fundraising and planning, but now the restoration is underway. It has begun. Scientists are working on the inside, and building engineers are working on the outside. The process has begun and will continue. We usually say underway when we want to emphasize that the process has recently begun. The fire happened a year ago, and the renovations have been going on for months now. But it's a multi-year process, so we are still early in the process of the full restoration. Universities across the U.S. closed their campuses due to the coronavirus, and as a result, a whole new experiment with remote learning is underway. A whole new experiment with remote learning has recently begun. Can classes be taught as effectively over Zoom as they can in person? We are about to find out because this experiment is underway. It has recently started. Sure, we have had online learning for a long time, but this is on a much bigger scale, and it's relatively new for a lot of people. That's why we say this massive experiment with remote learning is underway. It has started somewhat recently. The United States is required by its Constitution to perform a count of all residents once every 10 years. This year's census measures everyone living in every place in America, from the biggest cities to the smallest towns, as of April 1st. The process to count every American and every foreigner living in America got underway earlier this year. It is now past April 1st, but the process of doing the count will continue for several months until everyone has, theoretically, been counted later this year. The process got underway earlier this year. When it got underway, the website was established, forms were mailed, public service announcements were broadcast on television. That's what happened when it got underway, when it just started. Another way to use underway is to say something is well underway. When something is well underway, it is advanced in the process. By the summer, the U.S. Census will be well underway. By then, this is in a month or two from now, most people will have filled out their forms. The many census workers will have knocked on millions of doors, collecting information in person. It will be well underway. There will be a lot of activity, and it will be well advanced in the process. It will no longer be just at the beginning. So when we want to specify that something is not at the beginning any longer, we say well underway. We talked in lessons 165 and 242 about the Democrats who want to run against Donald Trump this November. The process to select a nominee started early, way back last June, when candidates started to enter the race. Then the elections got underway in February with the first few states to vote. Now, we're in mid-April, and the primary election season is well underway. So many states have voted so far that we now think we have a winner, Joe Biden. It's not over yet. States will continue to vote until June, but the process is well underway. It's not at the beginning anymore. In June, we'll know who gets to go head-to-head against Trump in the fall, and it looks increasingly like Biden since his main opponent has dropped out. Today's song of the week is Rock Steady by Aretha Franklin, who we talked about in lesson 79. I picked this song this time, and I picked it because it's one of the songs in the Hulu series Little Fires Everywhere, which I'm watching, and of course because it's Aretha, and this is our update lesson. So there you go, Rock Steady, which accompanies the morning routines of the two very different characters, Mia and Elena, in this series. One last update for you. Lesson 151. We talked about the new Coca-Cola with caffeine. It started in Asia, and then I heard from listeners in Mexico and Brazil who had seen local versions of it, but I never saw it here. Granted, I don't drink a lot of soft drinks, and I don't find myself in that part of a grocery store or convenience store. But the other day, as I was stocking up on supplies at Target, I saw a new taller, thinner can of Coke, and that's when I knew it was here. It's called Coca-Cola Energy in the United States. I bought one can, and I tried it as I was writing this lesson. And I have to say, I don't hate it. On your first sip, you can smell just a little bit of that sweet energy drink kind of smell. The consistency of the drink, how it feels on your tongue and in your mouth, is classic Coke. The flavor is just a little bit different from the real thing, a tiny bit sweeter, and without as strong of a caramel taste. I was expecting it to taste like Red Bull, which I don't like. JR tried it, and he said he liked it too. So I won't drink this a lot. I get enough caffeine from coffee, but I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised. So that's all for today. This was a long one. Remember, plainenglish.com/live, L-I-V-E, to check out our schedule of live events on Zoom. It's been fun getting to know all of you, so we'll continue to do live events. See you on Monday.